Peace, beautiful soul, and welcome to the official Soul Liberation Energy Report for the Cancer New Moon of 2026. I would imagine the most potent new moon in the history of humanity, in the future of humanity, but certainly one of the most, okay? This new moon is taking place against a backdrop that is incredibly dynamic, very supportive on an evolutionary level when it relates to the soul. I want to take a moment to just kind of remind us and ground us into, why we're here. So we know that as ancient beings, we came to this earth for some very specific reasons, right? And we know that those reasons have everything to do with who we are as a soul, correct? How dare I? And so those soul level reasons that we came here are why we study astrology, right? Because we want to know, why did we come here, right? What are the wounds carried on the level of the soul that we came to heal? What is the karma? What are the lessons that we came to resolve, to break through? And the astrology chart gives us great clarity on those things. We also want to know on a soul level, what is our higher purpose in terms of what we came to contribute to the evolution of humanity, right? What are the soul level gifts that we carry? What are our unique strengths? And so that's all related to why we study, astrology, what I call shamanic astrology, but astrology in general, right? Which is a very, very, very ancient science. It's an ancient mystical science, right? And really astrology tracks the patterns, right, that emerge over time, over hundreds of thousands of years, as our ancestors and we continue to track the evolutionary patterns that emerge through the relationships between the planets. So, that's why we're here. And so now in this current moment, in current time, we're looking at what are the planets doing in the sky? What is the configuration? What is the evolutionary pathway that the ancestors are creating in this moment for us to continue to grow and evolve and heal? So that's why we're here. And, part of the purpose behind tracking the patterns and the cycles, just realized I forgot to make sure the sound is turned off. It's not. Part of the reason for tracking the patterns and the cycles, right, is that we start to track the patterns and the cycles in our own lives. And then once we track the patterns and the cycles in our own lives, right, that's when we get to look at what patterns do we want to interrupt? What cycles do we want to break? So I want to dedicate this new moon to the Great Mother. The return of the Great Mother, the return of the balance between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, between the Great Mother and the Great Father, you know, which is an equilibrium that has existed in a place of balance for most of humanity, right? This current configuration of imbalance that we were born into, is a very recent, right? It's like we think of it as, permanent, but it's very recent, right? It's really just over the last 5 to 10,000 years that these kinds of imbalances have developed, and as we continue to grow and evolve on an individual and collective level, right, we are returning to the place of balance between the masculine and the feminine within and as expressed in the world. So, I had a lot of resistance to recording this message today. It took me a long time to get here. And I think part of how I finally did get here was just to realize that there's just really no way to capture on a linear, rational level the potency of this time. And so I just have to kind of sit down and, do what I do best, right? Just allow the energy to come through. But also it's because I've been moving through a particularly potent time in my own evolutionary healing journey. And I have encountered a level of rage that I've never encountered before. And I think part of that is that I have allowed myself to connect with and actually experience a level of rage that is new for me. And I think what that required was that I had to come into a different level of understanding around who I am and self-acceptance. Because part of what that rage has allowed me to do is to defend myself and to protect my boundaries, right? And it's almost like that revelation, that realization that like I'm worth defending, I'm worth protecting. And, one of the things I teach in, the soul journey of a healer, the soul journey, the whatever version of the program that you took or that you may have taken, is the importance of reclaiming our narrative, you know. And that is a journey that can be ongoing. And so I just have recently gone through a very deep layer of that, you know. And I think part of that has to do with the shedding, the burning of, what I've been speaking about as a suffering empath, you know. Um, the death of the empath, the death of the suffering empath who tolerated certain behavior because we are so highly empathic that we make contact with why the other person is behaving in a toxic, inappropriate, unreasonable manner. And because we know why and we have compassion for the why of that person's behavior, we tolerate behavior that we should not. And so I have reached a place where I had to draw a line in the sand. And, I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for that. And so, of course, this took place during cancer season. Of course it did, because it involves family, and cancer season is all about family, right? Cancer is ruled by the moon. The moon, of course, is, really the grandmother, right? I mean, we come through the grandmother, we come through the grandmothers, right? So it's the blessings and the wisdom of the grandmothers, and it's also the pain that the grandmothers have carried. And this pain continues to be acted out in the people around us in our family, and through us. And so we have the job of transmuting that pain. And so I think part of embodying divine order and putting things into divine order is having clear boundaries around what we will and will not tolerate, you know. And so I know for me, I've never in my life allowed myself to connect with rage on this level where I literally felt like the rage was consuming me. The rage was just coursing through me, and not just for a minute, for days, right? It was like I was just burning. The rage was consuming me, and it's led to boundaries that are inconvenient. It's led to me speaking my truth and claiming and honoring who I am on a whole different level. And I can see that it was very necessary, you know. And so on a soul level, I can see why that was so important, regardless of the fact that on the external layer of perception and reality, you know, nothing has changed in the field in terms of that person's behavior, but on a soul level, that was something I feel that I needed to go through. So the third thing that I want to talk about is that I feel like part of the reason it's taking me a long time to get here is because we're doing so much energetic work right now in the field, meaning our energy bodies, our light bodies are changing and shifting and recalibrating and expanding and reconfiguring at such a rapid rate right now. It's like it's sometimes it feels like a full-time job. It's a very active part of this experience, and I want to move into talking about the backdrop of this new moon, which is like just beyond profound. It's something that almost, you know, you could listen to 100 different astrologists and you might be able to tap into the surface of it, right? It's so profound, right? We had the great conjunction on 2/2, 220, which is the number 2/2, right? Which is the number, if you add the two and the two together, that's a four, right? Which is home, which I do feel like a whole part of this year is coming home, like coming home to ourselves, right? Four rules the, you know, the fourth house is the house ruled by the moon, right? It's the house of the home. And part of coming home to ourselves is really learning on a profound level how to accept like who we are, claiming that and loving that, right? And not judging ourselves against these sort of external um, definitions or rules of how we're supposed to be and who we're supposed to be. And I think stepping into this new chapter, because we're in the year of the one, we're in the year of the fire horse, right? Like everything is aligning on so many different levels that this is a new year. This is a new beginning. This is literally a like step up to the plate and like hit the home run, you know, or at least decide that you have the ability to hit the home run, you know. This is the like take that shot. You know, this is like believe in yourself and know that like you can do it. And that's why there are all these super intense squares happening from the outer planets in fire. Because it's like, come on, like you got to do it. Like it's what you came here to do, you know? So there is like this pressure. It's like we've been under this like pressure cooker. And so, you know, on the one hand, we have the outer planets coming into this super like mystical, sacred geometric, really sacred geometric configuration. You know, that's this basket formation that you've probably been hearing about from other astrologists. You know, and that's because of the fact that, you know, Pluto finally moved into Aquarius, right? Permanently last year and has been moving slowly, you know, through the early degrees of Aquarius air, but not just regular air, right? Galactic air, awakening air. You know, then we finally had Saturn and Neptune come into Aries right around the same time as the Aquarius new moon in February. And so then, you know, we have Saturn and Neptune in fire. And not just any fire, cardinal fire, ignition fire, pioneering fire. And so because air and fire are supportive of each other, right, they have been coming into this supportive relationship. Now Saturn is a little bit further on in degree points, so it's not at the exact same crazy degree as all these others are. Like again, how is it possible that they're all at 4 degrees? Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, right? Uranus went into Gemini on April 25th. So now Uranus is going to be coming up to 4 degrees in July. And then Jupiter will be at 4 degrees of Leo. So, this configuration is like highly supportive of this like evolutionary upgrade. This like you can do the thing. Like you really can do the thing. Like you have universal support to do the thing. And I think part of what we've been going through during Cancer season is we've been under some serious heavy squares, and even before Cancer season started, Jupiter has been at the final degrees of Cancer. And Jupiter was squaring Chiron. Jupiter was squaring Eris. And it brought to the surface a lot of old wounds that we had to deal with, that we had to feel and process and walk through. And the squares to Eris is like that rage, you know. And so now we're at this new place where those squares are starting to ease off. I mean, Mercury is still in a square to Saturn, and I might be able to get into that later. But, the square to between Jupiter, the square, the square between Mercury and Eris is the one that has really eased off. Sorry, there are other squares that are still active, but the one between Jupiter and Mercury and Eris, that's the one that has like started to break up. And I personally have felt that ease off a lot, right? In terms of my own rage, kind of like integrating, you know? And so, right as that softening has happened, we have Venus moving into Virgo. And so, what's really fascinating about this time is that Venus moving into Virgo means that she's conjunct the South Node, right? The South Node of the moon, which is like a astral point that has strong spiritual energetic significance. It's not an actual luminary. And so, the South Node represents what we're releasing collectively, what we're kind of integrating to it's almost like what we are, yeah, what we are integrating so that we can embody the higher expression of Virgo as opposed to the lower expression of Virgo. So let's just briefly touch on that, right? So we know Virgos are like the Virgo energy is very service oriented, attention to detail, right? Shows up, is consistent, all those great energies, right? But the lower expression of the Virgo energy has to do with the fact that Virgo can be very exacting, right? Very exacting, perfectionist, very critical of the self, critical of the other, very in the head, very detached from the heart and spirit, right? Because Virgo is part of the Virgo Pisces axis of service, right? Pisces being in divine service and Virgo more being in like earthly service. And so, this opposition between the South Node in Virgo and the North Node in Pisces is really about us shedding that old way of showing up in that more exacting way, right? Where there's that sacrificial, that self-sacrificing, that overdoing, that energy, of almost being like devoted to doing something that the mind says we have to do, and that's that like sort of like exacting duty-based energy. That's what no longer is supposed to be our guiding light. And so, as we come to like literally the final weeks, the final 2 weeks, you know, of the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo, we have to realize that like this is a big graduation point for us, meaning the North Node in Pisces is asking us, trust the energy, follow the flow of energy, right? Move with spirit, right? That's like that hummingbird medicine, right? And so there's something that we have to give up. There's a way of judging ourselves and being exacting and self-punishing and it's like, enough, right? And that's where the cancer thing comes in, where it's like, what would it really take for you to treat yourself the way the great mother would treat you, right? Where when you fall short, when you can't get it done, when you can't finish everything, instead of beating yourself up and punishing yourself and judging yourself and criticizing yourself, which are all mechanisms of control of the patriarchy. And I've already talked about this enough for you guys to remember this, but I don't mean men. I mean the patriarchy. Because men have also been damaged and harmed by the patriarchy. So, part of how we are healing the patriarchy is by bringing back in the Divine Mother, right? When you fall short, when you don't get it done, when you, whatever, when you make a mistake, start to notice when that story, that looping mind starts to come up and you're beating yourself up and you're chastising yourself. And it's like, enough. I was talking to a really beautiful friend of mine who probably will be watching this video at some point. And we were talking about how, as single mothers, we carry the load of, 10 people. And then so often we beat ourselves up because we feel like we fall short. And I told her, like, I refuse, you know. I'm trying to, make a living, run a spiritual business, provide for my children, be a good mother to my children, be there for my parents, be a good friend, cook healthy meals, right? Like I will not beat myself up and chastise myself for not doing it perfectly. I refuse. I'm going to speak to myself in a loving way. I'm going to celebrate the things that I have been able to do and make peace with the fact that there are some things I'm not going to do. And there are some things that I'm not good at, right? And that's okay. That's why the tribe exists, right? Like the tribe exists because we're only supposed to do our part, right? Like I'm only meant to show up in my gifts. That's my part. My part is not to do it all. That was never my part, right? That was never how we as humans were designed to do it all, you know? So I want to briefly speak to a couple of aspects that are going on that are very specific. So I've already mentioned to you guys that one of the biggest things happening this month, as opposed to this huge basket configuration, this huge sacred geometrical evolutionary support of the outer planets, right? Is the fact that the nodes of the moon are going to shift from Virgo Pisces to Aquarius Leo, right? Because the nodes of the moon, they move in the opposite direction of the rest of the planets, right? Just like the precession of the equinox, which changes about every 2,000 years, it moves in an opposite direction. So it moves in the same kind of direction as when the planets are in retrograde, like Mercury retrograde right now. Okay, so that's on the 26th, working backwards, right? Now, I want to talk about the fact that as Venus is moving into Virgo, which happened on July 9th. I also got to hold this beautiful citrine that I'm obsessed with. As Venus moves into Virgo and comes into an exact conjunction with the South Node, that is not a conjunction to take lightly because South Node energy, especially at the final degree points, right? Think about it. The South Node has been in Virgo since 29 degrees of Virgo. And right, and it's now at the zero, the 1 0 degree point. It's all the way at the graduation point, the initiation point. And and Venus is conjunct that. So that is a surrender. That is a surrendering of old karma, past life karma, that is a completion around something that has to do with relationships, because that's Venus, right? And I would say with a particular focus on the release of relationships that have been very duty bound, something that, is it's no longer working, right? Because remember, Virgo is also like our day to day, our everyday life, our routines, our health, right? So something that's no longer working is asking for completion, is asking for surrender, is asking for closure. And it may be a relationship. And I don't necessarily mean a romantic relationship. I mean a relationship that, there's karma attached to it. It could be romantic, but it doesn't necessarily feel romantic, especially because of the fact that we're in Cancer season. So then, right after that conjunction, today, Venus is trying to Chiron, right? Chiron has just moved into Taurus. Venus is at 0 degrees of Virgo. Chiron is at 0 degrees of Taurus. So they're in a beautiful trine. And so part of that energy is like, I love and I value myself. I love and I value and I honor myself. And that's why I'm allowing myself to surrender this karmic pattern, this karmic relationship, right? I'm choosing myself. And that's not always easy for the Virgo energy to do, right? Because it's so programmed to be dutiful. And there's that obligation that continues to kind of drive us, but it's coming out of the shadow. And, I know a lot of us in this tribe who are probably watching this video who we've almost been held captive, right? We've almost been like prisoners of that energy, that shadow. Like, you have to take care of this person. You have to do this thing. You have to show up in this way. And it's like, yeah, but at what expense? And somehow we've been justifying that, but it's like, can you really do what you came here to do while you stay on that hamster wheel of doing, doing, doing from this low vibrational place of obligation? Because underneath that doing, doing, doing and showing up and being in service is the shadow, right? Is the I can only feel loved, I can only be worthy if I overdo, if I overgive, if I prove my value, right? And then that's where that self-sacrificing, self-sacrificial, suffering empath continues to feed the demon. And that's what I hope we can evolve out of, truly, because it's like an energy leak for our entire soul tribe, right? It's an energy leak for us individually and as a soul tribe in terms of what we can elevate into individually and collectively. So I hope we can draw a line in the sand around that. Then we have the Sun conjunct Mercury. So there's going to be some really beautiful, just like messages, I would say, coming in, you know. Again, that's Cancer. And, again, just reminding ourselves that like Cancer is ruled by the moon is the mother, right? The great mother, the creator. And so part of this energy is really continuing to come home to and honor ourselves so that we can live in a place of coherence, so that we can vibrate to the frequency of unconditional love, which is our birthright and which is probably the most powerful thing that we can do as energetic beings, right? Regardless of where we are in the universe, but particularly on planet Earth, particularly during this time of great awakening. So, one of the biggest aspects that I want to make sure that you understand is the fact that Venus is squaring Uranus. All right. That's happening on the 13th. So that's going to be on Sunday, Monday. Venus will square Uranus. So that's one of the aspects that I want you to kind of be the most aware of as we move through the next few days. Like, if you think about it, right? Uranus is represented by lightning. Lightning strikes out of the blue unexpectedly. Uranus moves in that fashion. It's unexpected plot twists, right? It's shifts that shift something in a way we didn't expect, but we have to remember that like Uranus is always taking us higher, right? And so, just like with all the planets, right? And keep in mind that like Jupiter in Leo is opposing Pluto right now, right? It's coming into the exact opposition on July 20th. Uranus on Uranus is in a direct trine to Pluto on July 18th. It means just so profound. On July 25th, Neptune is in a sextile to Pluto. So all this to say, like, right, if you recall, Pluto is going to push us towards our empowerment. Pluto is going to remove things that are keeping us separate from our power, right? And Uranus is the great liberator, the great awakener. So it is likely that something in the next week is gonna shift that is meant to liberate us, right? That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean it's going to be what we wanted. It's not, that doesn't mean it's going to be what we thought was going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad. It means that it's supporting our evolution. At least that's what I believe about Uranus. But Uranus is my ruling planet, right? I'm an Aquarius rising. So I don't want to go on forever and ever, we are going to have a full moon coming up in 2 weeks, our full moon in Aquarius, probably the most dynamic full moon of the entire year. Then we'll be in the Lion's Gate. We'll be in eclipse season. And by that time, hopefully you have been able to tap into this Jupiter and Leo energy that is asking you to choose courage, you know? Jupiter is expanding that Leo energy, right? Leo, the lion, is the heart, right? Courage lives in the heart. And I feel like right now we're really being asked to choose something that it might feel dangerous because it involves risk. It involves believing that something is possible that maybe we've always wanted, that we always wanted to go for, but we weren't sure. We weren't sure if we should go for it, if we can go for it, if it's really possible. And the universe is like, yeah, it is. Believe in it. Go for it, you know? And so by the time we're in eclipse season in August for the Lionsgate, it's like there is the possibility that we are already stepping up to the plate with the bat, right? We're already shooting our shot in some way related to what it is that lights us up and excites us and gives us the motivation to say, you know what? I'm gonna ground into the thing that I really want. I'm gonna choose myself, which means believing that I can have what I want, which we know as ancient light beings, that means embodying our purpose, right? Believing that we can be part of creating a world that we want to live in, right? That we believe that we can have a level of influence on this planet in our own lives that is meaningful, that brings a greater level of purpose and fulfillment than we've been able to experience so far. And so, in case you forgot, the frequency of the earth has dramatically changed since we were children, since most of our lives in the last 2 years, in the last year, in the last 6 months. I mean, the Schumann resonance is increasing, the frequency of the earth is increasing. Our energy bodies have been completely, cleared and reconfigured. We are not the same energetic beings that we were. All that to say, a lot is possible that was not possible before. All right. So all that to say, believe in yourself, choose your dreams. Part of what we've been moving through on an energetic level of the healing that's taken place through Jupiter and Cancer, the healing that's taken place through these squares between Eris and Chiron and now Saturn is like allowing the past to just be in the past, right? Like put down the sword, make peace with the past, as the guy says in the Peanut Butter Falcon movie, right? May all the wolves of your past be laid to rest, right? And that doesn't happen automatically. It happens because you choose. You choose to lay the wolves of your past to rest because you're worth it, right? Because you receive nothing. You receive no value for you or for anyone else, but continuing to entertain the wolves, right? And so what can your life look like when you are no longer responding to life from the place of your emotional wounds? What can your reality evolve into when you can truly exist and vibrate and think and move from a place of deep self-worth and deep self-honoring and emotional safety, right? You know, Cancer, the Capricorn full moon that we just had and the Cancer season that we're in is the axis of safety. The physical safety of Capricorn, the emotional safety of Cancer, right? So when we are able to come home to ourselves, when we are able to create emotional safety for ourselves, that's when we learn how to say yes, right? It's safe to say yes to myself. It's safe to believe in my dreams. It's safe to go for what it is that I came here for because I'm safe. I'm safe in this world. I'm supported by the universe. I'm supported by my ancestors. I'm supported by my higher self. You know, so that frequency, right, is the frequency that the world needs to continue to grow and heal and evolve. And that frequency is a frequency where solutions and resources and opportunities and partnerships just show up in your reality, right? Because as we continue to heal and choose ourselves, our frequency begins to shift into one is consciousness, the energy of unconditional love, right? And that's the energy of the fifth dimension. And the fifth dimension is where we get into that flow state, right? Where we're no longer entertaining the wolves. I love wolves, by the way, but right, it's a metaphor. We're no longer entertaining those low vibrational fears of unworthiness and separation, consciousness, separation from spirit. We know that we are great spirit. We know that we are vessels of, unconditional love, of divine love. We know that we are worthy to receive what we need to receive to truly do what we came here to do, to fulfill our dreams, to embody our heart's desires, right? So that is my deepest wish for you. A reminder this came from the beautiful waters of the Dominican Republic, the ancient portal of Atlantis, the waters of Yamaya, the Great Mother. This is Larimar that I brought back from my last trip. This is a Larimar little pillar here that I have on my altar. And then this is citrine. Citrine is the stone of Oshun, all right? The second chakra, the sacral chakra. And these are the pearls of my grandmother that I've been wearing recently. Isn't that crazy? If you know me, if you know the rebel that lives within me wearing my grandmother's pearl is like, I have made peace with my mother. I've made peace with my ancestral lineage. I have realized that the time has come for me to receive my ancestral blessings, that I'm worthy, that I'm deserving. And I'm also ready to receive the ancestral energetic support of my grandmother. So may you receive all the blessings of Cancer season. May you receive all the blessings of this Cancer new moon. I'm sending you a very big hug and Lots of love, lots of reminders from the universe that you are loved. You are part of a soul tribe that honors and sees you and is here cheering you on. You have all the support that you need to create, to manifest, to attract the life that you deserve. So, blessings from the Great Mother, giving thanks to the Great Mother. Thank you for being here. I'm going to be posting this video on YouTube. So, you get early access if you're in the Soul Mastery Academy on School, which is $22 a month for the two soul reports, the two soul liberation energy reports. But I will be also posting it on YouTube the day before the new moon. So please consider sharing this with someone who you think would benefit from this wisdom and from this transmission. Peace and blessings, Soul Tribe.